Hello, my name is Untold Force. This video covers the basics of binding the VKB Gladiator NXT and EVO line of joysticks in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. This video is designed for new VKB pilots as well as returning ones, so I've broken it into short chapters that you can jump to below. VKB controllers are based on modular principles and are designed so that you, the pilot, can configure the hardware and software as you see fit. This may seem a little different if you're new to VKB gear, but you'll soon appreciate the nearly endless possibilities that this offers to your flight sim setup. There will be additional videos in this flight simulator series for other popular VKB controllers, such as the Stex throttle system, gunfighter joysticks, NXT series of flight modules including the FSM-GA, THQ, and SEM, and finally the T-rudder pedals. This is my personal setup. One of my favorite things about VKB is that I can go from work configuration to flight configuration in less than 60 seconds using the VKB UCM mounts. Before we go further, let's make sure that your Gladiator is properly assembled, configured, and calibrated. If you haven't done so already, please watch the Gladiator NXT EVO Quick Guide 2024 video, which covers these topics. The link to this video is in the description below, or you can find it on the VKB Sim YouTube channel. If you have any questions or problems, you can jump into the VKB Discord, linked below. We even stage regular community flights in Flight Simulator, and you're invited. To make the control binding process easier, I've made a set of fillable PDF templates that are available on the VKB website at vkbcontrollers.com. Click the Downloads button and you'll see the templates below. There are two sets of templates, blank ones that you can fill in yourself, and starter templates, which are already filled in with some of the controls that I find most useful in Flight Simulator 2024. While the starter templates can get you going, I encourage you to find the controls that work best for you and tailor the bindings to your preferences. This is my recommended starter binding for the Gladiator NXT EVO with the Space Combat Grip. While this may look a little confusing at first, I'll go over the main controls and help you get the bindings programmed into Flight Simulator. If you have the PDF downloaded, take a moment and try editing a few fields to see what you can do with it. Every button input is listed. Let's look at the A3 center hat as an example. The A3 hat has 5 possible inputs, each of the 4 directions, plus a button press inward. The same pattern of input options is repeated in the template with a few exceptions. There are 2 versions of the Space Combat Grip, regular and premium. The regular grip has fewer overall inputs, but the starter template should still be fine. Just don't bind the options that you don't have buttons for. Other variations on the template include the rapid fire trigger on the Gladiator SCG Premium Grip, which can both be pulled and pushed, so both options are listed on the template. The main red trigger has 2 stages, so both the first and second stage can activate different options. Analog axes bindings are listed at the bottom, including the A1 analog mini-stick for premium grip. By default, you can switch the A1 mini-stick from POV mode to analog mode by pressing in on the stick. The last major thing to note is the D1 pinky finger button. I use this button as a modifier for many of the other controls. Think of it as a sort of shift key, which doubles the available buttons on the grip. Any of the commands with +M in parentheses should be assigned with the D1 pinky finger held down in addition to the other buttons in MSFS 2024. Your edits to the templates can be saved, printed, or opened on other devices. Some pilots like to keep printed copies of their bindings handy, while others may use a second monitor or tablet for reference. VKB Device Config, or VKB Dev Config for short, is going to be a helpful tool for all stages of the Flight Simulator binding process. You should already have it downloaded as part of the quick guide, but if you don't, now's a good time to get it on your PC. Let's open VKB Dev Config at this time and go over some of the most important features. The top panel lists all of the VKB devices you have connected. I have the Gladiator EVO right-handed listed right here, so I'll click it to load the settings from the device. There's an entire manual dedicated to things that you can do with this incredibly powerful software. But right now, we want to open the Test tab at the bottom and click the Buttons/POVs tab in the middle. Go ahead and click a few buttons on your device. You should see the corresponding buttons light up red in the Test tab. We will use this tool to find the device buttons so we can bind them in Flight Simulator. Now, let's click the Axes 1 tab in the middle of the screen. This lists all of the analog inputs coming in from the Gladiator. Try moving the joystick now, and watch as the axis X and axis Y move. Try adjusting the mini throttle on the base. You'll see how axis Z responds. As you rotate the grip left and right, you should see Rot Z respond. If you have the premium grip, press in on the A1 Ministick now to switch the Ministick from POV mode to analog mode. Note the small red LED light up when the Ministick is in analog mode. That's a great way to tell at a glance whether you're in POV or analog. Move the stick to see Rot X and Rot Y move. Now that we are armed with all the tools we'll need to get the job done right, let's load into Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. There are several ways to open the controls page. The first is by clicking the gear at the top right and selecting Controls. You can also access the Controls page directly while in flight by moving your mouse to the top of the screen. The devices list on the left shows every controller currently detected by Flight Simulator. The mouse and keyboard profiles are added directly by Microsoft, but you should also see your VKB Sim Gladiator NXT or EVO listed. Click on it and you'll see the categories of control inputs listed. The search bar at the top allows you to search for a control by name. This is incredibly helpful because you have the names of many of the controls from the starter template. You can also go through the controls category by category. Once you have your controls bound, you can also search by input. One of the most important things about this page is the filters box at the bottom. Filters None will show every control available in the sim, which is usually what I like to set this page to. Selecting Filters Assigned will show every currently bound control to the joystick. Filters Essential only shows the controls that Microsoft and Asobo consider to be essential to flight. Having this selected can sometimes cause problems by hiding things from view. Flight Simulator 2024 does not import any existing Flight Simulator 2020 control bindings. It also has a number of serious bugs affecting control bindings at this time, so please refer to the official Microsoft and Asobo forums and release notes to keep track of the bugs that have been fixed. If you already have controller bindings, such as Gamepad 2024 Transversal or Gamepad 2024 Planes, please delete them so we can have a fresh start. Now that you are familiar with the controls page, it's time to bind some controls. Let's jump into free flight mode in the Cessna 172 Skyhawk and put it on the runway at your favorite airport. This will allow us to test the control bindings as we go along, and the Cessna is a fantastic demonstration aircraft, as most pilots have spent some time in one. Let's try assigning a button input. These inputs are on-off switches and have no precision control. We're going to assign the Cockpit/External View Mode control to the B1 side button on the stick. Type the name of the binding, in this case, Cockpit/External View Mode, into the search bar at the controls page, and make sure that you have filters set to none. There are two ways of binding controls in Flight Simulator 2024, having the game detect your control input automatically or inputting it manually. The automatic way is quick, but can sometimes detect the wrong input or try to assign multiple inputs. There should be two blank buttons next to each control input. You can assign up to 2 controls for every input in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 per device, which gives you plenty of flexibility. Go ahead and try assigning it using auto detection. Click in the box and press the B1 side button. Oh no! A wild profile appeared. The Control Profile dialog box is new to MSFS 2024 and can be both powerful and annoying. While MSFS 2020 had control profiles, there was no way to automatically assign them to aircraft. MSFS 2024 breaks it down even further. It has separate profiles for general controls, which covers things like view controls, and airplane controls, which covers airplane inputs. You can have separate profiles for single-engine GA planes, single-engine complex GA planes, multi-engine planes, military jets, airliners, gliders, and helicopters. For example, my starter binding for the Gladiator uses the encoder EN1 on the base for mixture control. In an airliner, that would be useless, so you could rebind EN1 to something more useful to you. Without spending too much time on profiles, let's give this profile a name. Gladiator Starter Binding sounds good. Click the Apply to All Aircraft button, and also click the Set as Default button. Since this binding is a view control, you'll also need to repeat this process for the airplane controls later. Now we can get back to binding our button. You should see the button assignment appear. Save the changes and go back to the aircraft. Press the B1 side button, and you should now be on the outside of the aircraft. Excellent work! You can also use this technique to assign the majority of the inputs to your Gladiator, since most of them are just button presses. Let's also try the more precise manual input assignment method. Let's go back to the controls page. We're going to assign brakes to the first stage of the main trigger. You can use VKB Dev Config to find the button number for the first stage of the trigger. On the test page, it'll show button 1. Back in Flight Simulator, instead of clicking on the empty box to assign an input, click the gear. The left-hand side of the page has a long list of every possible input available from your Gladiator joystick. Click the blue box next to button 1. The box now has a check in it, meaning that your brakes are assigned to the first stage of the trigger. There's one more thing that I'd like you to try: requiring multiple button presses for a single action. If you look at the bindings template, you'll see a number of controls requiring the D1 modifier or pinky button. Let's use the C1 push button as an example. On the binding page, it says that a simple button press will activate quick reply, but holding the pinky modifier and pressing the same button should open Communications panel. In VKB Dev Config, use the test panel to find the button number for your D1 pinky modifier button. For me, that's button number 5. The C1 button press for my stick is 20, so let's try binding Open Communications panel to 5 and 20. I'm going to use this manual method and check the boxes next to buttons 5 and 20 and then save this. Let's try it now. It works. Sometimes you may want to remove a binding. To do that, just click the gear icon to the right of the control and click the trash can icon for Delete Assigned Control. At the bottom of the starter binding template, you'll see the axis labels. Let's try binding the ailerons axis right now. Search for ailerons axis and note how it's tagged as airplane's axis. All of the inputs we've bound so far were tagged as digital. Digital inputs are best used for button presses, where they act as simple on-off switches. Axis inputs are analog, meaning that they can have thousands of possible values. It is generally best to keep axis inputs on analog axes and digital inputs to buttons. Let's bind the ailerons axis now. Click on the first blank box now, and then move your joystick from left to right. It should now show joystick L-axis X. Save and test your controls on the Cessna, and you'll now see the ailerons moving. Good work! Often, an analog axis input results in the opposite effect of what you desire. Try repeating the binding process for the rudder axis to the joystick twist, or joystick R-axis Z. Save and go back to the plane. Notice how the rudder turns to the left when the stick is twisted right, and vice versa? That's not how it should be. We need to invert the axis. Let's go back to the controls and click the gear next to rudder axis. Click the box next to Set Inverted Axis, and it should now show a check. Now, the rudder should behave as normal. If you're fortunate to have the premium version of the Space Combat Grip, the Ministick does double duty as a POV and set of analog axes. This is fantastic for view controls. For the POV binds, make sure the red LED is off. For the analog or axis binds, make sure that it is on. You can switch between the two at any point while flying by simply pressing in on the thumbstick. On the controls page, select the hardware settings button to adjust dead zones and sensitivity. You can do this through VKB Dev Config or in Flight Simulator, but I prefer to adjust things in Flight Simulator so I don't change my settings for other games. As of the time of this video, there's a Flight Simulator bug where no inputs are displayed on this page, but that doesn't mean that we can't adjust the values. I personally like to decrease the sensitivity plus and sensitivity minus settings to negative values, especially for the rudder twist axis, so that I have finer control near the center of the joystick range, where precision is most needed. If you want a larger dead zone, increase the dead zone value will allow for minor stick movements near the center without sending input to the plane. Adjusting the extremity dead zones will allow you to send maximum inputs without physically setting the stick to max deflection. This can be useful for those with accessibility issues who have difficulty moving the stick. You now have the skills necessary to bind all of the controls on the starter binding sheet in Flight Simulator 2024. While it may seem like a lot, you don't need to bind all of the controls at once. If nothing else, binding the ailerons, elevator, rudder, and throttle axes along with the brakes, parking brake, flaps, and cockpit/external view mode buttons will at least get you in the air. Once you have your controls bound, jump into the next video, First Flight with the VKB Gladiator EVO, where we will go for a short flight with just the VKB Gladiator in the same Cessna 172 Skyhawk. If you have any suggestions or comments, please drop them below, or visit the VKB Discord using the link in the video description. Thank you for watching this video, and happy flying!